In the harsh lands of Blackwood Mesa, a woman's worth could be traded for the price of a single horse. Her name was Elara Thorne, and her story began the day her own mother sold her to a stranger. But what no one knew was that the man who took her in wouldn't just give her shelter. He would give her something far rarer in the Old West: dignity and love. Part 1. The weight of shame and silent strength. Her burgeoning belly brought not joy, but a branding of shame. So, her mother, Martha Blackwood, brokered a trade. Her disgraced daughter for a sturdy horse, a beast of burden for a human one. Serpent's Pass, nestled within the unforgiving expanse of Blackwood Mesa territory. It was the autumn of 1887. The wind that morning cut through bone, dry and relentless, mirroring the land itself. Serpent's Pass was little more than a collection of weathered shacks and a dusty livestock yard, a place where hopes arrived to wither or be measured by the pound. The sun had barely crested the eastern hills when Martha Blackwood dragged her daughter across the cracked earth, her grip on Elara's arm like a vice, as if the girl might bolt. Elara Thorne, a woman of 20 years, 7 months pregnant, waddled beside her mother. Her faded cotton dress, stretched taut over her belly and thighs, offered no comfort. Her cheeks were crimson, raw from the biting chill, but mostly from the searing shame. Her gaze remained fixed on the ground, a habit ingrained over years. "Keep your eyes straight, Elara," Martha snapped, her voice as brittle as dry kindling. "You've got nothing to hold your head high for." The market pulsed with life, a chaotic symphony of shouts from ranchers, the shrill squeal of hogs, and the insistent cries of traders hawking everything from coiled ropes to rusted nails. Yet, on this morning, the livestock was not what seized attention. It was the sight of a round-bellied girl, propelled through the gates as if she were merchandise for auction. Whispers, sharp and cruel, splintered the air. That Thorne girl, the fat one, knocked up. Her mama's finally rid of her. Theron Stone stood apart, leaning against the far fence, one boot propped on the lower rail, arms crossed over a chest of formidable size. He was a monolith of a man, easily clearing 6 feet, broad through the shoulders, his face shadowed by a wide-brimmed hat. He offered no flicker of emotion as Martha approached. "You Theron Stone?" Martha demanded, dispensing with civility. He gave a single, slow nod. "You said you'd take her." His gaze slid past Martha, settling on Elara, whose eyes remained stubbornly locked on the dirt. He offered no reply. Martha let out a bitter, joyless laugh. "Hell, you'll get the better end of this deal. She eats more than a hog and whines louder than a broken gate. But you'll get your horse." Behind them, a ranch hand led forward, a glossy black stallion, its coat gleaming, tethered and calm. Theron spared it a brief, assessing glance, then his eyes returned to the girl. "She got a name?" he asked, his voice a low rumble, deep as a canyon shadow. "Elara," Martha clipped. "Elara Thorne, 20 years old, stupid as stone, and carrying a bastard. No need to dress it up. You want her? Take her. You don't? I'll dump her by the creek and let the buzzards sort it out." Elara's knees threatened to give way. "You got anything to say, girl?" Martha barked. Elara opened her mouth, but only fear and thin air escaped. "She doesn't cook, barely cleans, cries at night like a child, and smells of potatoes half the time. But if you're looking for a womb to warm your empty shack, she'll do." Theron stepped forward. For a fleeting heartbeat, Elara imagined he might finally speak to her. Instead, he untied the horse's lead rope and handed it to a nearby boy. "She'll ride with me," he stated, his voice devoid of inflection. "That's it." Martha blinked. "You got your horse, the rest is none of your concern." And then, Martha offered a cruel, knowing smirk. Well, hell, at least now she's worth something. First time in her life. She spun on her heel, departing without a backward glance. Elara stood frozen, the biting cold seeping through her thin shoes. All around her, faces stared, some etched with curiosity, others with open disgust. A few with a flicker of pity, but no one moved. Not one soul stepped forward. "She is yours now, Cowboy," a man called out, a rough laugh following his words. Theron remained silent. He simply nodded toward his wagon. Elara moved slowly, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs, her stomach a knot of dread. Her hands instinctively cupped her belly, a futile shield for the child within. As she climbed onto the wagon bench beside the massive man, she whispered, her voice barely audible, "I am not a thing." Theron looked straight ahead, took the reins, and in a low, even tone, replied, "Only, you ain't. Not to me." And they rode off into the swirling dust. The wagon groaned its way over the uneven prairie, its wheels rattling with every rut and root. Elara sat in the back, her hands cradling her swollen belly, the weight of it pressing down like a stone. Her dress clung, damp with sweat and dust. She did not speak, nor did Theron. He held the reins with hands as large as shovels, his broad shoulders hunched beneath a faded coat, his face an unreadable mask. The silence stretched between them, long and vast, not tense, but simply empty, as if he had no need for words, and no intention of filling the air with those that were not needed. As the sun dipped low, painting the sky in rust and violet hues, they turned off the main path, following a narrow trail through low, rolling hills. Sparse scrub pines dotted the landscape. A hawk circled once overhead, then vanished behind the ridge. Elara squinted as a cabin came into view. It was not large, but it stood firm, logs fitted tight, its roof well patched, a faint wisp of smoke curling from its chimney. A lean-to sat beside it, sheltering a stack of split wood and a half-built cradle. The fence line was straight. The gate still hung true. Theron pulled the wagon to a stop. "You can come in," he said simply, climbing down. Elara hesitated, her feet meeting the ground with more force than grace. Her back ached from the journey. Every part of her felt swollen, sore, and profoundly alien. She followed him toward the cabin. Inside, the air smelled of cedar and rich earth. It was a simple place, one room, yet meticulously clean. A sturdy table with 2 chairs, a small bookshelf, a coat hook by the door. The bed, though plain, looked solid, its blanket folded neatly at the footboard. A worn but well-padded couch sat near the window. "You can rest there," Theron said, gesturing towards it. Elara looked at him, uncertainty clouding her eyes. "Where will you sleep?" "I'll figure it out," he replied, already turning away. She sank onto the couch slowly, the cushion groaning softly beneath her weight. Her hands remained folded over her stomach, shoulders tight, afraid to touch anything, to occupy any more space than she already did. Theron moved about the room with quiet purpose. He poured a glass of water and set it on the table beside her. Then, without another word, he took a lantern and stepped outside, the door closing softly behind him. Elara did not sleep much that night. The couch was narrow, the blanket scratchy, but it was the silence that truly unsettled her. No slamming doors, no sharp words, no heavy footsteps meant to remind her of her unwanted presence. She lay still for hours, listening to the crickets, to the faint crackle of dying embers, to the insistent thrum of her own heartbeat. Morning arrived, slow and pale, filtering through the window. She blinked against the light. At first, she thought she had dreamed it, the tantalizing aroma of cooked food. Her stomach growled, loud and sudden. She sat up carefully. On the table sat a plate of biscuits, still steaming, alongside eggs and a slice of bacon. Next to it, a tin cup of milk and a neatly folded napkin. Outside, Theron stood, splitting firewood. His shirt sleeves were rolled up, his arms flexing with each powerful swing of the axe. He did not glance in her direction, merely worked with a steady, enduring strength. Elara stared at the food, her fingers twitching in her lap. No one had ever prepared her breakfast, not without a demand, not without a threat, or a scathing remark about her size. She had always served others, silently, shamefully. She rose slowly, waddled to the table, and for a long moment, she simply gazed at the plate. Then, quietly, tears traced paths down her cheeks, not sobbing, just the quiet ache of surprise and a profound confusion. She took a bite. The biscuit was buttery, warm, and wonderfully real. From the porch, Theron's axe struck wood again. Through the open window, she whispered, unsure if he could hear her. "Thank you." There was no reply, but she thought she saw him pause, just for a second, before lifting the axe once more. The days that followed drifted by in a soft, unexpected silence. Elara hadn't known what to expect, but it certainly wasn't this. The measured sound of Theron's boots on the porch each morning, the comforting scent of firewood and coffee, the absolute absence of cruelty. He spoke little, but his presence filled the space like something steady, unyielding, yet never imposing. One afternoon, she heard the front door groan again, that stubborn sound she had winced at every time it opened. Theron stood over it now, a wrench and a can of oil in his hands, his brow furrowed in concentration as he worked the hinges. "That sound's been driving me crazy," he muttered, more to the door than to her. She said nothing, just watched as the grating noise vanished with each slow turn of his wrist. The next day, the chair near the window, the one she often used to rest her aching legs, held a folded quilt across its seat. Beneath it, an extra cushion. She sank into it with a surprised sigh, her swollen ankles grateful for the unexpected softness. He never mentioned the change, and yet every small thing he did seemed to articulate, "I see you," not in the way others had, through narrowed eyes and sneers, dissecting her body as something to ridicule. Theron never once looked at her that way. His gaze did not linger or judge. He glanced only when necessary, always meeting her eyes instead of her curves. He never inquired about the baby, never pressed about the father, or why she had been traded like livestock. Instead, he offered space, and in that space, slowly, something within her began to breathe. One evening, as Theron sanded down the frame of the baby's cradle, Elara found herself speaking. "My daddy died when I was 8, she said quietly. Theron paused, not looking up, simply listening. He was gentle. He used to sing while mending fences. Said work goes faster when the heart's warm. Theron nodded slightly, running his palm over the grain of the wood with slow, deliberate strokes. When he passed, Mama changed. She said I looked too much like him, called me soft, lazy, said no man would ever want a girl like me. The words hung heavy in the air, but Theron didn't feel the need to fill the silence. He simply kept sanding, patient and utterly present. Elara looked out the window, blinking rapidly. I used to sleep in the barn sometimes, just so I didn't have to hear her call me names. She chuckled, a bitter, hollow sound. Cold out there in winter, but quieter. Theron stood and stretched, the floorboards creaking beneath his considerable weight. He offered no pity, merely placed the finished rail of the cradle gently beside her. That night, she ate her supper without shame. Her fork did not tremble, and she dared to ask for a second helping. The next morning, Elara watched him repair the back gate. A breeze caught her dress as she stood nearby. For a moment, fear sparked within her, the ingrained dread of being seen, judged, mocked. But Theron only glanced at her and said, "Wind's picking up." Not a word about her form, not a look that stung, just the weather. Later, They sat on the porch, the sun dipping low behind the hills. She shifted in her seat, her hands resting on her belly, her eyes fixed on the horizon. "Can I ask you something?" she ventured. Theron grunted softly, his own unique way of saying, "Yes, why don't you ask what happened? Why I ended up like this?" He leaned back, his arms resting on his thighs. "'Cause it ain't my business unless you want it to be," he said. She studied him, her voice barely a whisper. "Don't you think I'm disgusting?" The wind stilled. Even the tall prairie grass seemed to hold its breath. Theron's brow furrowed, not in confusion, but in something closer to pain. "I see a woman," he said quietly. "One who's carried more hurt than anyone ever should. And she's still standing." Elara's throat closed around her breath. Theron looked out across the vast land. "You survived things most don't. That don't make you disgusting. That makes you strong." She said nothing for a long while. But inside her, something uncurled, something soft and trembling that had been buried for years beneath other people's words. That night, she slept without clutching the blanket. The morning started like most, quiet, steady, with the scent of wood smoke trailing from the chimney, and the distant thud of Theron chopping logs. Elara was hanging herbs to dry near the window when she heard the distinct sound of hooves on gravel, not Theron's wagon. He was still at the back of the property. She stepped onto the porch, one hand instinctively cupping her belly. A man in a tan duster reined in just past the gate, his horse snorting plumes of dust. He wore a wide-brimmed hat tipped low, a smirk already tugging at his unshaven face. "Well, I'll be," he drawled, sliding down from the saddle. "Thought the stories were just smoke till now." Elara took a small step back. She didn't know his name, but the way he looked at her, like she was merely a curiosity, not a person, set her nerves on edge. "So, it's true," he went on, laughing low. "The giant took in the fat sow. What's it like out here, sweetheart? He feeding you slop or scraps?" She said nothing. The man's eyes swept her frame. "Look at you. That belly is about to split. You're like a walking birth sack, ain't you?" Her breath caught in her throat. The cabin door opened. Theron emerged slowly, wiping his hands on a cloth, his jaw tight but unreadable. The man tipped his hat mockingly. "Theron Stone, never thought you'd turn rancher and nursemaid. What's next? Diapers and lullabies?" Theron remained silent. The man laughed louder. "Hell, you could have had any number of women in town. Instead, you're out here playing savior to a walking butter churn." Still, Theron didn't move fast. He walked calm, measured, like a storm gathering slow. Then he stopped at the fence. Elara watched as his hands gripped the top rail. With one wrenching motion, he tore a thick plank free and slammed it onto the dirt in front of the man's boots. The sound cracked the silence like lightning. The man stepped back, startled. Theron's voice was low, even. "You lost. Just saying what everyone else is thinking." Theron didn't blink. "Then say it someplace else." The man squinted, his smile turning mean. "You going to hit me with that stick, Stone?" Theron didn't raise the board again. Instead, he reached out slowly and placed one hand gently on Elara's shoulder, steadying her from behind. His eyes never left the intruder. "No one touches what I care for," he said. "Not with hands, not with words." Elara felt the warmth of his hand through the fabric of her dress. Not possessive, not proud, but undeniably protective. The man sneered. "You're picking trash, Stone. But don't be surprised if folks spit in your face for it." Theron didn't flinch. He just looked at the man. Something in that gaze, silent, unmoving, was louder than any threat. The man mounted his horse with a huff. "Suit yourself. But I wouldn't raise no child out of shame." He turned and kicked up dust on the road, the hoof beats fading into the hills. Elara stood frozen. Her body trembled, but not from fear, from something else entirely. She turned slowly toward Theron. You didn't have to say all that. He looked down at her. Yeah, he said softly. I did. She swallowed. No one's ever. Then let this be the first, he interrupted. His voice wasn't loud, but it rang like a bell in the vast quiet. For the first time in her life, someone hadn't just stood next to her. They had stood times for times her. Elara looked down at the splintered plank lying in the dust. It wasn't a weapon, it was a warning. Not to the world, but to herself. She wasn't alone anymore. Part 2. Seeds of Belonging. Roots of Strength. The days softened. There were still silences, long and deep, but they no longer pressed on her like a weight. Instead, they wrapped around her like a quilt, worn and familiar. They became a space where things grew, quietly, trust, perhaps, or something close to it. They were the breath between words that mattered, a pause where neither of them had to explain why they stayed. Theron never directly asked for help, but Elara noticed the way his hand slowed when she drew near, the way he handed her tools instead of doing it all himself. It wasn't just kindness, it was something gentler than that, a subtle invitation to belong, a quiet request for shared presence. It started with herbs. These are yarrow, he said one morning, crouched low beside the shed, where sunlight dappled the soil. His voice was low, even, patient. Boil them for fevers. Dry the leaves for cuts. He broke off a sprig and handed it to her, sap already staining his calloused fingers. Elara knelt slowly, letting the cool earth press into her knees. The leaves were rough, their smell bitter, potent. She stripped the stems as he showed her, then bundled the stalks tight with twine and hung them high in the rafters of the shed, where they would dry in the warmth. The work stained her hands, sap and dust, little green flecks caught under her nails. But she didn't mind. It was the first time in months she'd felt useful, like she wasn't just waiting to give birth, like she was living now. Next came the sunflower seeds. Split these, Theron said the following day, pouring a mound of striped shells into a weathered wooden bowl. Chickens like them small. Helps them digest better. Elara carried the bowl to the porch, lowered herself into the chair he'd fixed with extra cushions, and got to work. Her fingers found a rhythm. Crack, flick, drop. The seeds clicked against the wood like tiny heartbeats, steady and insistent. It was a small task, repetitive, almost mindless, but it grounded her, centered her. When she was done, Theron reappeared with a small tin pail and offered it without a word. Let's feed them. They walked to the chicken coop together. She waddled slow and wide-hipped, her belly a heavy, constant presence. He matched her pace without comment. The chickens darted toward them in a flurry of yellow and white, pecking at her skirts, brushing against her ankles. Elara laughed, high and sudden, like a bell that hadn't rung in years. The sound startled even her. Theron turned slightly, his wide-brimmed hat casting his face in shadow. You got a gentle voice, he said, watching the birds settle near her feet. She blinked. No one's ever said that to me. That evening, she found something waiting for her on the porch. A rocking chair, hand-carved from fresh cedar, its surface still warm from the day's Sunday. Its back curved gently, its legs strong and balanced. She ran her hand along the armrest, the wood surprisingly smooth beneath her fingers. You made this. Theron gave a one-shouldered shrug. Figured you might want a place to sit while you watch the sky. She did just that. As the sun fell behind the hills, painting the prairie grass in amber and deep violet, the wind picked up as dusk settled in, carrying a chill that promised autumn, and before she could reach for her old, threadbare shawl, Theron stepped outside and handed her a folded bundle. A new one, knitted, rough in places with loops slightly uneven, but undeniably handmade, soft green wool threaded with browns and pale creams like earth after rain. Elara clutched it to her chest, the warmth seeping into her skin. "You didn't have to." "I know," Theron said, his voice a low, steady current in the vast quiet. Then he turned and walked back inside. That night, sleep refused to come, not because of pain, but because something inside her stirred, something she couldn't name, like warmth where frost had lived too long. Under the glow of the oil lamp, Elara sat at the table, the new shawl wrapped over her shoulders, needle in hand. She hadn't sewn since her mother sneered that she ruined every stitch she touched. But tonight, her fingers moved steady and sure. By morning, she had a gift, a square of cotton, plain, uneven, imperfect, but stitched with care. On the corner, one letter, T. She folded it and placed it beside Theron's bedding on the floor. No note, no explanation. At dawn, she rose to find him already outside splitting wood, and there, wrapped around his thick wrist, was the handkerchief, tied like it mattered. Elara didn't cry, she didn't sob or hide her face, she just stood there at the window, letting the tears fall freely, quietly, not out of sorrow, but because for the first time in her life, she had offered something of herself, and it had been accepted. No ridicule, no mockery, just dignity, just care. She wasn't a burden anymore. She was becoming part of something real. The wind shifted. It came sharper that morning, carrying not the scent of dust or wild flowers, but trouble. Theron noticed it first, a flicker on the horizon. A wagon drawn by two dark bays, followed by a smaller rider on horseback. One wore a long black coat and a collar high at the neck, the town preacher. The other rode stiffly, a rifle slung behind his back, the sheriff. And between them, perched upright in the wagon seat, was a woman with gray-streaked hair coiled like a noose. Martha Blackwood. Elara saw the dust cloud from the porch. Her hands froze over the laundry basin. The fabric clung to her knuckles, soap suds dripping like sweat. "No," she whispered. Theron stepped up beside her, his presence a solid anchor in the suddenly churning air. "Inside," he commanded, his voice firm. She obeyed, heart pounding, the swell of her belly suddenly feeling 10 times heavier. By the time the visitors dismounted, Theron had already latched the barn doors, drawn the curtains, and pulled the long rifle from the top shelf of the wardrobe. He set it down, not pointed, not raised, just ready. A knock came, sharp, impatient. Theron opened the door halfway. He stood like a wall in the frame, his voice low. "Morning." The sheriff spoke first. "Got a bit of a dispute." Martha stepped forward, skirts stiff and dustless despite the journey. Her eyes scanned the cabin's interior with disdain, cataloging every simple detail. "My daughter," she said like the words tasted bad. "I'm here to take her back." Theron's brows didn't lift. "You traded her." Martha's lips curled into a sneer. "I bartered temporary custody, not ownership. She's blood. She belongs home. She belongs where she's safe." The preacher cleared his throat, adjusting his spectacles. "The matter might require town arbitration. A woman in her condition living alone with an unmarried man." Theron's voice cut clean through the polite veneer. "What does Elara want?" They all paused. Martha blinked, momentarily stunned. "She's not in a state to know what she wants." Theron turned without another word and stepped aside. Inside, Elara had been listening, her breath held tight in her chest. She pressed a hand to her chest, the other resting protectively on her belly. When he looked at her, she knew it was her choice. Not his, not Martha's, hers. She stepped forward slowly, every movement trembling, but deliberate. Her faded dress was plain, her hair loose in soft waves. Her chin, for once, held high. "Mama," she said evenly, her voice surprising her with its strength. Martha's eyes narrowed. "Don't mama me, girl. You're coming home." Elara took a breath, holding Martha's gaze. "You sold me," Martha scoffed. "Don't be dramatic. I made a deal. You were eating us out of house and hope. You embarrassed the family. You left me no choice. No choice." Elara's voice broke, but she didn't stop. "You could have helped me, protected me, asked me who the father was, but you didn't even want to know." Martha's gaze darted toward the preacher, a flicker of discomfort crossing her face. "I did what I had to. You sold me for a horse," Elara said, the words cracking across the yard like a whip. "I may be heavy. I may be pregnant, but at least now," she said, her voice rising, ringing with a newfound conviction. "Someone sees me as a person, not a burden, not a price." Theron stood quietly behind her, unmoving, a vast, silent presence. The preacher shifted uncomfortably, his gaze fixed on the dust. The sheriff looked down at his boots. But Martha, her mouth opened and shut once. She took one step back, then another. Her face flamed red, not with shame, but with something colder, a burning resentment. "You'll regret this," she hissed, her voice venomous. "That child," Elara interrupted, her eyes burning with an unshakable fire. "That child will grow up knowing they were wanted, not traded, not silenced, not broken." Martha turned, skirts snapping in the wind. She didn't say goodbye, didn't glance back, just climbed into the wagon and snapped the reins. Dust rose behind her wheels. The preacher gave a half-hearted nod and followed. The sheriff looked once at Theron, then at Elara. He nodded once, a gesture of quiet respect, and turned his horse without a word. When the sound of hooves faded into the hills, Elara leaned against the doorframe, her breath shaking. Theron stepped beside her. "You did that," he said softly, his voice full of quiet awe. She closed her eyes, tears finally slipping free. "I finally said it," she whispered out loud, the words tasting like freedom. "You can say it again," he offered, his hand gently touching her back. "I'm not property," she murmured. "I'm not shame. I'm not a mistake." Theron didn't answer. He just stood beside her, a silent witness to the profound shift within her. And for the first time, Elara felt something surge deep inside her. Not fear, not grief, but power. True, unwavering power. Part 3. The storm, the birth, the bloom. The rain came hard that night, a relentless assault against the small cabin windows, each drop a fist pounding on the glass. The wind howled through the eaves, a mournful, savage cry, and lightning cracked over the hills, briefly illuminating the stark, wild landscape of Blackwood Mesa territory. Inside the barn, where Theron had insisted they go when the first pangs began, warmth flickered from a single lantern, casting long, dancing shadows. The horses in their stalls were quiet, sensing the profound shift in the air, their soft breaths a counterpoint to the storm's fury. The barn smelled of hay, of wet wood, of earth, and of the profound, coming change that pulsed through Elara's body. Elara gripped the edge of the rough blanket beneath her, her knuckles white. Her breath hitched, a desperate, shallow gasp. The pain had started just after dusk, a low, steady ache that had steadily intensified. Now it came in waves, sharp and deep, ripping through her like thunder, echoing the chaos outside. "I think it's time," she whispered, the words thin and reedy, tears already tracing hot paths down her temples. Theron was beside her in a breath, his presence a solid, unyielding anchor in the swirling maelstrom of her fear and agony. He had already brought buckets of fresh, cool water, laid down clean, soft cloths, lit the fire higher in the makeshift hearth he'd built in the corner of the barn, and locked the heavy barn doors from the inside, sealing them off from the raging world. "You're safe," he murmured, his deep voice a steadying balm as he knelt beside her, his wide-brimmed hat, now off, revealing a face etched with a quiet, fierce determination. "We'll do this together," she nodded, biting her lip so hard she tasted blood through the next brutal contraction. The storm outside raged, but in the small, warm haven of the barn, there was only the primal sound of her breathing, ragged and desperate, the rustle of the blankets, and the steady, reassuring scrape of Theron's boots as he moved with quiet purpose. He brought fresh towels, held her hand in his massive, surprisingly gentle grasp, soaking cloths in cool water to press against her forehead, against the damp skin of her neck. "I can't," she whimpered once, when the pain flared sharp and cruel, a white-hot knife twisting deep within her. "You can," he said softly, leaning closer, his gaze locked with hers, unwavering. "You already have. You've survived more than most. This is just another climb." His hand, huge and calloused, was incredibly gentle as he massaged her lower back, anchoring her as she cried out, a strangled sound torn from her very core. "Breathe, Elara. Just breathe through it." She screamed then, loud and raw, a sound that ripped through the howling wind, a sound from some place deeper than bone, primal and ancient. Sweat poured down her face, plastering strands of hair to her temples. Her whole body shook with the immense effort, the agonizing beauty of creation. "You're doing it," Theron whispered, his voice hoarse with his own unspoken strain. "Almost there." The next push tore through her, a wrenching, shattering explosion of pain and effort. But after it, a sudden, profound silence descended, deafening after the storm within her. Then, a cry, wild and furious, and utterly alive. Elara sobbed before she even saw her, tears of relief and overwhelming emotion flooding her vision. Theron leaned back slightly, cradling a tiny bundle slick with the very essence of life. His face, usually so unreadable, was now soft, almost reverent. But his hands shook, just slightly, as he carefully wrapped the baby in a clean blanket, checking her tiny limbs, her perfect miniature face. Then his gaze, full of an emotion Elara couldn't name, lifted to meet hers. "She's here," he said, his voice thick with emotion, barely a whisper above the faint pitter-patter of rain on the roof. Slowly, reverently, he placed the tiny, living bundle in Elara's waiting arms. She looked down, her vision blurring, her heart swelling to an impossible size. Red skin, still wrinkled from her journey, eyes tightly closed, a tiny mouth opened wide in protest, fingers clenched into perfect miniature fists, impossibly small, impossibly perfect. Elara gasped, a sound that was half laugh, half sob. "She's beautiful," she whispered, her voice choked with a love so fierce it almost hurt. Theron crouched beside her, one knee in the hay, watching mother and child with an intensity that suggested he was afraid to break the fragile, sacred moment. He didn't reach out, didn't touch them, he just looked, his gaze soft and full. "This little girl," he said, his voice hushed, "she's proof." Elara blinked at him, still crying, bewildered. "Proof?" she asked, her voice trembling. "That you lived," he said, his gaze fixed on her, then on the baby, then back to her. "That you fought." He reached for a fresh towel and gently wiped her temple, drying the sweat and tears. "She's the reason they don't get to write your story anymore. Not without you in it. Not without your truth." Elara clutched her daughter closer, burying her face in the soft, downy hair. In her arms wasn't just a child, it was everything she had survived for. It was the future. Outside, the storm broke into a quiet drizzle, the wind a mere sigh. Inside, new life breathed for the very first time, filling the barn with its fragile, fierce existence. And Elara, torn, aching, exhausted, had never felt more whole, more powerful. Rumors, like prairie fire, always found their way across Blackwood Mesa territory. But this time, they didn't carry shame. They carried curiosity, then wonder, then, quietly, unexpectedly, respect. It started with whispers in the general store, hushed tones over sacks of flour and barrels of nails. The blacksmith's wife, a woman known for her sharp tongue, was the first to see her, truly see her. It was a late summer morning, sun warm on the dusty streets of Serpent's Pass. Elara walked with a new gait, still full-figured, but no longer weighed down by an invisible burden. Her plain dress hung differently now, more comfortable, less stretched. Her cheeks were flushed, not with shame, but with the late summer sun, and her newborn daughter was cradled to her chest, a tiny bundle of fierce new life. Beside her, Theron Stone was a mountain of a man, his flannel shirt rolled to the elbow, his gaze following Elara's every step like she was the only thing that ever made sense, the only star in his vast, quiet sky. There were no chains, no metaphorical leash, just something stronger than either: devotion, a deep, silent understanding. They bought flour, soap, and seed. They didn't rush. They didn't hide. Elara even offered a small, hesitant smile to the woman behind the counter, a smile that was returned with surprised warmth. Theron gave a slow, deliberate nod to the young ranch hands who used to spit when she passed, their faces now carefully neutral, their eyes avoiding his. No one dared mock her now, not openly. Some townsfolk still whispered, "Is it true he took her for a horse? Is it true she gave birth in his barn?" The questions hung in the air, but they were different now, less accusatory, more like genuine inquiry. And the way Theron held the baby against his vast chest, carefully, gently, while Elara counted out coins, softening mouths, and quieting laughter. He was protective, yes, but more than that, he was proud, not of possession, but of shared joy, of a future he was actively building. They came to town more after that. Not often, just enough to be seen, to be real. And little by little, Elara Thorne became a name people didn't say, with curled lips or a sneer. Her name began to simply times be asterisk, a fact of the landscape, much like the mesa itself. Spring came, a slow, tender awakening. The valley behind Theron's land, once so stark, turned green with soft grasses and the shy, delicate blooms of bluebells. Wildflowers grew in riotous patches, without asking permission, bursting forth in defiant beauty. So did love, a quiet, sturdy, enduring love that had taken root in the most unlikely of places. They didn't plan a grand wedding. There was no preacher to pronounce them man and wife in the eyes of the town, no crowd to bear witness. Just the three of them, Elara, Theron, and their baby girl, who had a cry like a hawk and a grip on Elara's finger like hope itself. They stood under the wide, ancient branches of an old oak tree, its leaves a newly vibrant green, barefoot in the soft spring grass, the wind tugging gently at Elara's skirt. Theron wore the same faded flannel shirt he always did, the sleeves rolled up, revealing his strong, weathered forearms. Elara wore the shawl he'd knitted for her, its uneven stitches now beloved, a symbol of his quiet, painstaking care. He held her hands, his large palms encompassing hers, rough but warm. She held his gaze, her eyes, once always downcast, now steady and bright, mirroring the vast, clear sky above. And with no one watching but the birds and the endless, silent expanse of the sky, they whispered vows that didn't need witnesses, because they were carved into the very air, into the heart of the land. "I see you," he said simply, his voice a low rumble, but ringing with profound truth. "I believe you," she answered, her voice thick with emotion, with years of unspoken longing finally finding release. He bent and kissed her, not hard, not fast, not with desperate passion, but with the kind of reverence a man gives to something once thought irrevocably lost, now found and cherished beyond measure. Their baby girl, nestled safely in Elara's arms, cooed softly, as if in agreement. Afterward, they sat in the shade of the ancient oak and ate honey biscuits, simple and sweet, tasting of new beginnings. There was no music, no grand speeches, just the gentle sound of the wind sighing through the leaves, and a woman's laughter, unapologetic, full, and utterly free, echoing across the land. That night, in their small, warm cabin, Elara held her daughter close, the baby's hair damp from the bathwater Theron had drawn for them. The fire crackled low in the hearth, a comforting presence. Outside, the stars blinked, infinite and watchful. Inside, a deep, abiding peace bloomed like something truly earned, a harvest after a long, harsh winter. Elara kissed her daughter's tiny, perfect hand and whispered into the soft darkness, her voice thick with love and conviction. "You weren't born from shame, my love." She paused, her voice trembling slightly, but firm. "You were born from choice and love, always love. You are pure, unburdened, and utterly cherished." And in that cabin, beneath a roof built by calloused hands, a home forged from silence and unwavering kindness, Elara knew she didn't need to be smaller to be worthy. She didn't need to be quiet to be safe. She didn't need permission to be happy. She just needed to be home. And she finally was. Part 4. The Echo of Freedom. The dust settles. The wind carries fewer whispers of judgment now. More of wonder, more of truth. We've journeyed with Elara Thorne through the harshest of seasons, witnessed her silent suffering, the branding of shame etched upon her very being. We watched as her mother, Martha Blackwood, cast her aside, a transaction of flesh for a sturdy horse, a life exchanged for mere sustenance, in the unforgiving landscape of Serpent's Pass. Who could have imagined that in such desolation, where hopes arrived to wither, a different kind of harvest would bloom? Elara's story began with a quiet surrender, her gaze perpetually fixed on the dirt, her body a canvas for the world's cruel judgments. She was defined by what she lacked, by what she carried, by the whispers that condemned her. But then, a mountain of a man, Theron Stone, entered her life. He wasn't a savior in the way stories often portray, not with grand pronouncements or heroic deeds. His heroism lay in his silence, in his steadiness, in the profound, unwavering act of simply seeing her, not as a burden, not as a broken thing, but as a human being worthy of dignity, worthy of care. Consider the weight she carried. The physical burden of new life, yes, but far heavier. The crushing weight of generations of shame, the societal scorn that sought to render her invisible, to strip her of her very name. Yet, in the quiet solitude of Theron's cabin, amidst the scent of cedar and rich earth, a new reality began to unfold. He offered no grand gestures, only necessities, a glass of water, a warm breakfast, a door that closed softly behind him, leaving her space. These were not mere acts of charity. They were the bricks and mortar of a sanctuary, built not with words, but with unwavering presence. Each small act became a revelation. The repaired door, no longer groaning under the weight of unwelcome intrusion, but gliding open smoothly, a symbol of barriers gently dissolving. The extra cushion on her chair, speaking volumes without a single uttered word. I see your pain. I seek your comfort. Theron's gaze, which met her eyes instead of her curves, was a revolutionary act in a world that had only ever dissected her body. He never pressed for explanations, never demanded the sordid details of her past or the identity of the father. He simply offered space, and in that vast, silent expanse, Elara, for the first time, began to breathe. Her voice, long stifled, found its fragile strength. She spoke of a gentle father, of a mother hardened by loss, of cold barns and bitter words. Theron didn't offer pity, that fleeting, often condescending emotion. He offered presence. He simply listened, a quiet witness to the unraveling of years of hurt. And when the cruel ranch hand, a shadow of the world she thought she'd escaped, dared to mock her, dared to call her walking butter churn, Theron didn't just stand by. He stood times for times her, his hand on her shoulder, his quiet, unwavering declaration: "No one touches what I care for, not with hands, not with words." This wasn't a claim of possession, but an act of profound protection, a defiant declaration that her worth was not for sale, not for judgment. It was in that moment, seeing the splintered plank at her feet, a silent warning to herself, as much as to the world, that Elara understood she was no longer alone. The turning point was undeniable. From the timid, downcast girl, a woman emerged, bold enough to confront the source of her deepest wounds. Martha Blackwood, arriving with the law and the preacher, sought to reclaim what she had discarded. But Elara, with Theron, a silent, immovable presence behind her, found her voice. "You sold me for a horse," she declared, her words echoing across the dusty yard, shattering the silence of generations of subservience. "I may be heavy, I may be pregnant, but at least now, someone sees me as a person, not a burden, not a price." This wasn't defiance born of anger, but of a newfound, unshakable conviction, a declaration of self-ownership that defied every expectation laid upon her. It was a reclaiming of her story, a refusal to let others dictate her narrative. Then came the storm, mirroring the tempest within, the pain of birth. In the flickering lantern light of the barn, Theron became more than just a quiet protector. He was her unwavering anchor. He didn't flinch from the raw agony of creation. He was there, steady, gentle, reminding her of her own immense strength. "You've survived more than most. This is just another climb." And when that tiny, furious cry filled the barn, not with shame, but with the pure, untamed essence of life, Theron's face, usually so impassive, softened with reverence. "She's here," he whispered, wiping away Elara's tears. "She's proof that you lived, that you fought. She's the reason they don't get to write your story anymore." The world had tried to write Elara's story in scarlet letters of shame and disgrace. But with Theron, she authored a new chapter, one of resilience, of love forged in the crucible of hardship. The whispers in Serpent's Pass changed. Curiosity replaced scorn. Respect replaced ridicule. The sight of Elara, no longer hiding, her daughter cradled proudly, her smile hesitant but real, beside the steadfast Theron, began to rewrite the very narrative of the town itself. Their quiet, simple wedding under the ancient oak, witnessed only by nature and their precious daughter, was not a validation by society, but a sacred covenant of two souls choosing each other, choosing love, choosing a life beyond judgment. "I see you," he said. "I believe you," she answered. Simple words, profound truths. This is a story that defies the dust, the judgment, the harsh realities of the frontier. It reminds us that sometimes the greatest strength is found not in fighting back with fists, but in standing firm with an open heart. It shows us that true family is not always bound by blood, but by choice, by an unwavering commitment to see, to protect, and to cherish. It speaks to the quiet revolution that occurs when one soul dares to claim their worth, when another dares to offer unconditional acceptance. Elara's journey from being a traded commodity to a woman, claiming her sovereign power, a mother whispering words of pure, unburdened love to her child, resonates far beyond the Blackwood Mesa. It echoes in the heart of anyone who has ever felt overlooked, undervalued, or deemed too much for this world. It is a powerful testament that love, in its purest, most steadfast form, can rise from the hardest ground, blooming in defiance of all odds, transforming shame into strength, silence into song. Her laughter, full and free, under the boundless sky, is not just a sound. It is a declaration that joy is not a privilege for the perfect, but a right for all who dare to embrace their truth. It's a reminder that home is not a place, it's a feeling, forged in the quiet spaces between two people who choose to build a world where every breath is unburdened, every choice is respected, and every soul is utterly cherished. No soul is ever too broken to be chosen. This isn't just a sentiment, it's the beating heart of their story, a truth that rides taller than any legend. It's the enduring legacy of Elara and Theron, a testament to the fact that even in the most unforgiving landscapes, love, patience, and unwavering belief in another's worth can build a world anew. This is their story, a story that invites us all to look closer, listen deeper, and believe in the transformative power of quiet strength and unwavering love. Part 5. The Enduring Legacy of Unbroken Souls. The dust settles, not just on Blackwood Mesa, but within the chambers of our own hearts. As the final echoes of Elara Thorne's journey resonate, we have traversed a landscape both physical and emotional, a terrain as stark and unforgiving as the frontier itself, yet ultimately blooming with an unexpected, vibrant truth. If this profound narrative, woven from threads of shame, silence, and defiant strength, has stirred something deep within you, if it has made you feel seen, recognized a flicker of your own unspoken battles, or reminded you that love, in its purest, most resilient form, can indeed rise from even the hardest, most barren ground, then know that you have truly walked this path with us. This is more than just a tale from the untamed West. It is a testament to the quiet revolutions that occur within the human spirit. We began with Elara, a woman branded by circumstance, her burgeoning belly, a public declaration of disgrace, her worth measured against the value of a sturdy horse. Her story, in those chilling early moments, was a stark reminder of how easily society can reduce a human being to a commodity, how quickly judgment can overshadow compassion, and how profoundly vulnerable we become when we believe the cruel narratives others impose upon us. Her gaze, perpetually fixed on the dirt, was a poignant symbol of a spirit constrained, a voice silenced, a life held captive by the weight of shame and the relentless scorn of her own kin. But then, the world shifted. A man named Theron Stone entered her life, not as a knight in shining armor, but as a silent, immovable force of nature. His heroism was not forged in battle or grand pronouncements, but in the unwavering, radical act of simply seeing Elara. He saw her not as a fat sow, not as a walking birth sack, not as the bastard-carrying burden her mother cruelly described, but as a woman worthy of dignity, worthy of space, worthy of care. His quiet presence, his deliberate kindness, his simple acts, a glass of water, a warm meal, a door that no longer groaned but opened softly, a cushion placed for her aching body, were not just gestures, they were sacred offerings, brick by brick building a sanctuary, where a broken spirit could mend, where a stifled voice could find its breath. Consider the immense weight Elara carried. Beyond the physical burden of her pregnancy, she bore the crushing legacy of generations of shame, the societal scorn designed to render her invisible, to strip her of her very identity. Yet, in the quiet solitude of Theron's cabin, amidst the comforting scent of cedar and rich earth, a new reality, an entirely different kind of harvest, began to unfold. It was a space forged, not with words, but with unwavering presence, where silent understanding superseded spoken condemnation. Every small act of Theron's became a revelation, a quiet refutation of every cruel word she had ever heard. The repaired door, no longer groaning under the weight of unwelcome intrusion, but gliding open smoothly, a symbol of emotional barriers, gently dissolving. The extra cushion on her chair, speaking volumes without a single uttered word. I see your pain. I seek your comfort. You matter here. His gaze, which met her eyes instead of lingering on her curves, was a revolutionary act in a world that had only ever dissected her body with narrowed eyes and sneers. He never pressed for explanations, never demanded the sordid details of her past or the identity of the father. He simply offered space, and in that vast, silent expanse, Elara, for the first time, truly began to breathe, not just physically, but spiritually. Her voice, long stifled, found its fragile, trembling strength. She spoke of a gentle father, a mother hardened by loss, of cold barns and bitter words, not seeking pity, but offering her truth. Theron didn't offer pity, that fleeting, often condescending emotion. He offered presence. He simply listened, a quiet witness to the unraveling of years of hurt, allowing her history to exist without judgment. And when the cruel ranch hand, a shadow of the world she thought she'd escaped, dared to mock her, dared to echo the dehumanizing labels, Theron didn't just stand by. He stood times for times her, his hand on her shoulder, a physical anchor, his quiet, unwavering declaration: "No one touches what I care for. Not with hands, not with words." This wasn't a claim of possession, but an act of profound protection, a defiant declaration that her worth was not for sale, not for judgment. It was in that moment, seeing the splintered plank at her feet, a silent warning to herself as much as to the world, that Elara understood she was no longer alone, no longer an outcast to be discarded. She was protected, cherished. The true turning point was undeniable. From the timid, downcast girl, a woman emerged, bold enough to confront the source of her deepest wounds. Martha Blackwood, arriving with the law and the preacher, sought to reclaim what she had so callously discarded, asserting a false ownership over a life she had devalued. But Elara, with Theron, a silent, immovable presence behind her, found her voice, not just a whisper, but a declaration that rang across the dusty yard: "You sold me for a horse." Her words, sharp and undeniable, shattered the silence of generations of subservience. "I may be heavy, I may be pregnant, but at least now," she declared, her voice rising, ringing with a newfound conviction, "someone sees me as a person, not a burden, not a price." This wasn't defiance born of anger alone, but of an unshakable conviction, a declaration of self-ownership that defied every expectation laid upon her. It was a reclaiming of her story, a refusal to let others dictate her narrative ever again. Then came the storm, mirroring the tempest within, the raw, primal pain of birth. In the flickering lantern light of the barn, Theron became more than just a quiet protector. He was her unwavering anchor, her steadfast guide through the profound agony of creation. He didn't flinch from the raw, beautiful messiness of it all. He was simply times there asterisk, steady, gentle, reminding her of her own immense strength. "You've survived more than most. This is just another climb." And when that tiny, furious cry filled the barn, not with shame, but with the pure, untamed essence of new life, Theron's face, usually so impassive, softened with reverence, his hands shaking slightly with the profound wonder of the moment. "She's here," he whispered, wiping away Elara's tears. "She's proof that you lived, that you fought. She's the reason they don't get to write your story anymore. Not without you in it, not without your truth." The world had tried to write Elara's story in scarlet letters of shame and disgrace, a tale of abandonment and societal scorn. But with Theron, she authored a new chapter, one of resilience, of love forged in the crucible of hardship, of worth rediscovered and fiercely protected. The whispers in Serpent's Pass slowly began to change. Curiosity replaced scorn, respect replaced ridicule, and the sight of Elara, no longer hiding, her daughter cradled proudly, her smile hesitant but real, beside the steadfast Theron, began to rewrite the very narrative of the town itself. Their quiet, simple wedding under the ancient oak, witnessed only by nature and their precious daughter, was not a validation by society, but a sacred covenant of two souls choosing each other, choosing love, choosing a life beyond judgment. "I see you," he said. "I believe you," she answered. Simple words, yet profound truths that resonated with the weight of years of unspoken longing finally finding release. This is a story that defies the dust, the judgment, the harsh realities of the frontier. It reminds us that sometimes the greatest strength is found not in fighting back with fists, but in standing firm with an open heart. It shows us that true family is not always bound by blood, but by choice, by an unwavering commitment to see, to protect, and to cherish. It speaks to the quiet revolution that occurs when one soul dares to claim their worth, when another dares to offer unconditional acceptance. Elara's journey from being a traded commodity to a woman claiming her sovereign power, a mother whispering words of pure, unburdened love to her child, resonates far beyond the Blackwood Mesa. It echoes in the heart of anyone who has ever felt overlooked, undervalued, or deemed too much for this world. It is a powerful testament that love, in its purest, most steadfast form, can rise from the hardest ground, blooming in defiance of all odds, transforming shame into strength, silence into song. Her laughter, full and free, under the boundless sky, is not just a sound. It is a declaration that joy is not a privilege for the perfect, but a right for all who dare to embrace their truth. It's a reminder that home is not a place. It's a feeling, forged in the quiet spaces between two people who choose to build a world where every breath is unburdened, every choice is respected, and every soul is utterly cherished. No soul is ever too broken to be chosen. This isn't just a sentiment. It's the beating heart of their story, a truth that rides taller than any legend, more profound than any whispered shame. It's the enduring legacy of Elara and Theron, a testament to the fact that even in the most unforgiving landscapes, love, patience, and unwavering belief in another's worth can build a world anew. This is their story, a story that invites us all to look closer, listen deeper, and believe in the transformative power of quiet strength and unwavering love. May it inspire you to see and be seen, to choose and be chosen, and to find your own wild, beautiful truth in this vast, complicated world. The winds of the mesa still whisper her name, Elara Thorne, the woman who was traded like cattle, yet rose like dawn. In the end, she wasn't saved by pity or by luck, but by the quiet strength of a man who chose to see her worth when no one else would. And that's the truth of the Old West. Even in the dust and judgment, love can still take root, and shame can still bloom into grace. If this story found your heart, subscribe and ride with us again on Old West Stories.